Hello everyone. This week, as Prime Minister Modi is invited to the G7 summit and rising geopolitical tensions, a deeper controversy continues to unfold at home. Allegations have emerged linking Indian agents to violent operations on Canadian soil, including the assassination of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, arson attacks, and even surveillance of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. What does this mean for the national security of Canada, for the sovereignty of Canada, and Canada's credibility on the world stage? To help us unpack these critical questions, we are joined now by Dan Stanton, former CSIS official and expert on national security and foreign interference. So I welcome you, Dan, to TV84 and this show, The Fault Lines.
Well, thank you. It's
So,
a pleasure.
okay. So, Dan, the first question is like Mark Carney has been vocal about protecting Canadian sovereignty, especially in the Trump era. Yet his role in inviting Prime Minister Modi to the G7 raises eyebrows. Do you think this signals that economic interests are now being prioritized over Canada's sovereignty, particularly when Modi's government is facing serious allegations of orchestrating violence and espionage on Canadian soil?
Yes, I mean, it's a very bewildering decision that was made to invite him. And I understand there was also an invitation to MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. You know, we had this historic challenge between human rights versus international statecraft. And in this case, it's trade. And so I do find it odd. It was only a year ago that the RCMP made that unprecedented disclosure of the criminal activities the Indian government was doing in Canada, and murder, assassinations, all sorts of violent crimes, leading to 6 diplomats being expelled. So that's where Canadians were left with this. And the Indian government not cooperating. And now Prime Minister Modi is being invited and included into this group.
So, do you think, because the election of Mark Carney is basically on the rhetoric of Canadian sovereignty, to protect Canada from Trump and like this type of things. So, but in this case, like the response of Carney is totally focused on economic interests. So, because the attack on Canadian soil is like an attack on Canada's sovereignty. So, do you think this step of Mr. Carney undermining the Canadian sovereignty and the Canadian stand on human rights?
It is hard to reconcile because the key pillar of sovereignty is a country's ability to defend and protect its citizens, defend themselves. You need to defend our territory to be a sovereign state. And what we had with the Indian government through their intelligence services was, in my opinion, an assault on our sovereignty, a dismissal of the fact that we even have borders, and those were not borders were not being respected. So it is hard to reconcile it. If there's more to this, if there's some big secret deal somewhere that India is moving forward with helping Canada resolve the issues, perhaps a little bit more communication from Ottawa on that, because I think for a lot of Canadians, not just Sikh Canadians, are probably wondering why this about face if sovereignty is so important. It really demands a lot more information, in my opinion.
Okay, so in the recent days, there are now reports that Indian agents were allegedly surveilling even NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, even while he was a part of the governing coalition, as part of a
Yeah.
broader campaign of interference and potential violence. As a former CSIS official, how concerned should Canadians be about the reach and audacity of Indian intelligence operations on our soil? Are we dealing with a new and evolving kind of national security threat, you think?
It is. We've seen this with a number of other states. We've seen this Iran, Russia, where they have used, for example, criminal gangs to carry out some of these dirty jobs and use the private sector in a way for surveillance and things like that. We call it contracting out. India obviously is doing that. I'm not going to belabor it. You know all about it. not only in Canada, but in the United States. So from an intelligence perspective, from a national security perspective, this is a huge national security threat, what India has done and been doing. Now, if this was China and an agent of Chinese intelligence or just the government of China was putting surveillance on a senior politician, a leader of a political party, an opposition party, there would be outrage in this country. And there should be outrage in this country. But somehow we just don't get that excited about it if it's India. And what was done with Mr. Singh, I understand he was a serious threat to his life, and that he was under surveillance. And if they do this to politicians with his status, what happens to just regular Canadians who don't have that status, who aren't able to speak out? That's kind of disconcerting, in my opinion.
uh, and you are talking about the ordinary Canadians, how can they feel about their security, about their life? So even RCMP, in that press conference, they told the world that Indian agents were involved in arson, in the in different kind of threats, in different kind of operations. So that's why the invitation to Prime Minister Modi is just shocking to lot of Canadians, and especially for the Canadian Sikhs. So
Yeah.
do you think that the this Liberal government is sidelining the Sikh concerns about the security of the people in Canada?
It kind of looks like it. I mean, I'd like to go even bigger than that. It's not just Canadians of Sikh background; it's Canadians. It's as a Canadian, do we throw one group under the bus because of we want to move forward? And I understand we do need eventually to get a relationship with India. I'm not living in a cave somewhere. I know that. I know there's economic reasons. Perhaps this is a consensus of the G7. I don't think our prime minister made this decision just himself. I think he probably consulted widely with the group. And at the same time, we have to deal with Trump and the threat to our sovereignty from there as well. So I can understand we need to have a talk with India, but there's certain issues that were still unresolved. They were to lift the immunity on the 6 diplomats so the RCMP could pursue the investigation. There was to be some sort of acknowledgement that they did this. I mean, a real acknowledgement that they did this. Certain, I would call red lines between the two governments. Have we heard that India's moved forward on that? Has Mr. Modi vouchsafed something to Mr. Carney that, yes, we've found the people responsible and we'll deal with it? Maybe. But then if that's the case, at least in a general way, communicate it, because it does look like Canada's moving forward and is prepared to, I guess, overlook what India's been doing. These were crime waves right across the country
Yeah.
that they were organizing. It wasn't just the assassinations. You had mentioned arson, blackmail. I remember reading about the news reports and I was thinking, what's going on? All these gangs and criminals doing all this stuff, and it was all tied to people of South Asian background. Well, that was orchestrated by the Indian government through the Bolshoi gang.
Yeah, so these are the serious serious concerns for the for every Canadian. So now I'm moving to the next question. So Canada has long positioned itself as a global advocate for human rights and democratic values. By extending an
Yeah.
invitation to Prime Minister Modi, despite serious allegations of human rights abuses and foreign interference, despite his record, are we risking our international credibility? Uh, for the sake of human rights? Does this send a message that economic interests now outweigh Canada's moral
Mhm.
standing on the world stage?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think Canada's lost that credibility. Let's be frank, we're not the middle power we used to be at all. I mean, you can tell that, and obviously, due respect to the prime minister, he's trying to rebuild that and have get a Canadian voice that does more than just value signaling. And but and I can understand Canada doesn't want to be an outlier completely with allies and let's say the G7 and that. but it does seem kind of funny. My position has been, and I said this publicly, it's not that we don't get a relationship back with India. We need to. It's the timing of it and the venue. Is the G7 the appropriate venue? Is this the place to, have people on the red carpet and nice lunches and dinners and things like that, and we just forget about everything else? It's the messaging that I have a problem with. It's not the objective of getting back into a relationship with India. It's how it looks. And as you know, when it comes to politics, optics really matters.
Yeah. So, like the messaging it conveyed, the decision took by the Mr. Carney and his team, like it's a collective decision, as you say earlier. So, this message is problematic. Like it puts the Canada in a shade that Canada is weak. Like after the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, there was a rhetoric in the Indian media that that Canada is weak and we can hit Canada. Like their parliamentarians in the parliament, they are talking about attacking with the submarines and that kind of thing. So there's a rhetoric in India, like
Yeah,
Modi's government. Is you can say like a far right type of government, so they mobilizing the people in aggressive way. So
yeah.
do you think this posturing of Mr. Carney hardly hits the Canadian image on the world stage?
Yeah, it doesn't help. The image of Canada is weak. I mean, we saw this, the disinformation campaign India had, our former prime minister with allegations of cocaine on his airplane and all this stuff and gangs and everything and hand grenades being thrown at embassies and to make Canada look like this joke, being overrun by criminals and terrorists. And China, I'm sure it's no different than India and some other international states where they actually see Canada as weak. We're big on the talk, and we don't do much. And I just don't understand why again Kanaskas is the venue for these invitations and these talks, unless there's some big secret going on behind closed doors we don't know about. I have my doubts on that. But what does the RCMP think about this? What do the Crown attorneys that are prosecuting? There's 4 of them in jail for the killing of Mr. Nijjar. There's others in jail for a lot of those crimes. Those are ongoing prosecutions. The RCMP is under pressure to get some traction on these cases and prosecute them. What do they think of this? Is that going to impact any way on the future trial? Does anybody care about the
Yeah,
trial?
it's a big question. Then, like, it's about the how the law like rules in the land. So it will affect the proceedings of the law too. This decision of Mr. Carney, there is a possibility of that. So my next question is like, India's alleged involvement in foreign interference isn't entirely new. There have been
No.
concerns going back years, particularly around diaspora surveillance and influence operations. So, from your experience in CSIS, how deep and long standing is India's history of interfering in Canadian affairs, and how dangerous is this form of covert influence, especially when it escalates into violent actions?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's happened is we'll look at it from 2 angles: transnational repression, which is a lot of the criminal activity, and then the foreign interference, particularly in our electoral system. And what we've learned this year, what Canadians have learned this year, I've known this for quite some time, is that India is one of the main perpetrators of this. They're right up there with China, and particularly Russia, but more on the technical side with them. And so that this is because we haven't pushed back. We haven't checked it. We haven't had enforcement activity until recently. The foreign interference gets more sophisticated and it gets bolder. So that's why we see things like surveillance on a senior member of parliament, interference in a leadership race. Not that it changed the outcome, but the fact that they have the confidence to do that is because they've gotten away with it for years. And that's what happens. China's no different. They have a level of sophistication in interfering in our electoral system like nobody's business, but because there hasn't been much pushback.
So, this month is also a month of anniversary of Air India bombing too. So, all the things India, Canada, and the relations and the Khalistan angle in that. So, it also relates to that Air India bombing. So, taking into note the history of Indian operations in Canada, like overt operations and influence. So, there are questions and incomplete investigation into that bombing. So Sikhs demand the new investigation into that bombing, and India claims that the Khalistanis did that. So. How do you think about that bombing? Do you think the new investigation will be needed in the light of the recent events happening in Canada?
Uh, Respectfully, I prefer not to talk about the bombing. Okay,
Okay, okay.
I
So
I
yeah,
wasn't expecting.
it's your take.
Yeah,
Okay. So, the next question is: despite credible allegations of violent acts on foreign soil in both Canada
yeah.
and the US, India continues to be welcomed at high level forums like a G7. Is this less about economics and more about India's geopolitical importance to the US led Western bloc, particularly as a counterbalance to China? Are Western democracies turning a blind eye to a serious behavior of India in favor of strategic alignment?
I think what's happened is with starting with the Trump administration and the tariffs and the fact our alliances have been completely upended is there is a certain I don't know disorientation going on, and I suspect that the governments, Canada and the other G7 parties, are looking to sort of rewrite that. I mean, the other five in Canada, the big elephant in the room is going to be the president of the United States, right? There's all sorts of things, all the discussions. Canada looking for new markets, also looking for new alliances, is because of that. And so I think just our previous way of thinking and seeing things and having, I guess, the confidence of alliances has been shaken. And so perhaps that's how they're all seeing the G7 is who's going to be having a sidebar discussion with who's going over here. And as our PM had mentioned months ago, the relationship we had in the United States has completely changed. It's completely upended. And so I think maybe amidst all that chaos and uncertainty, the Canadian government is trying to find who they're going to do business with. And so that's probably why we have so many people participating now in the G7. I don't even know why they
Yeah.
call it the G7 anymore.
So yeah, from the it's like a G11, G12, or something more
Yeah,
than that. So,
it's like the Cannes Film
but
Festival.
yeah. So the question is then. I'm trying to take you to the South Asia, because
Yeah,
nowadays the U.S. led Western bloc. They are trying to fight to stand up to stop Chinese influence on the global stage. So
yeah,
in the South Asia, so India is like a major probable ally for Western countries. So it is a thinking in the global scenario. So so my question is, all these steps, India attack Gurpatwant Singh Pannu in US, try to attack Gurpatwant Singh Pannu
yeah,
in US, and there is the allegations of India commit murder of Sikh activists in UK, and the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. So after all these things, after all these violent acts, uh, even India is welcoming in these countries, like on a red, as you say, on a red carpets. So do you think it is more than the economical interest? Do you think the geopolitical angle is
yeah.
playing more in these decisions?
I think you're right. I think geopolitical dominates everything. Look at Saudi Arabia. What happened to Mr. Khashoggi? Murdered, chopped up into pieces by the Saudi regime, and then it wasn't long after the United States re-engaged with them. And I think that's the way it goes. I think human rights, if we're honest, takes a back seat to the geopolitical. I think that's the sad reality to it. But I think Canada can still move forward. They can still re-engage with India. They can still. We have 41 diplomats who are kicked out who didn't do anything wrong. So maybe there's a plan. But let's not go weak on holding India account to what they did in our country. To me, that is that if we want to be seen as a strong country, we can't renege on that.
Okay. So then, with your experience in CSIS and your expertise, how you think about, like you're saying, like human rights are nowadays on a backstage than the geopolitics. So the now this is an era of uncertainties. Like the last night, Israel attacks Iran. Their nuclear facilities, so you don't know what happened the next in the next minute. So in this era, you do you think like there is some scope, some space for the communities, for the nationalities like Sikh people who are fighting for their rights, for their freedom, who have aspiration for their sovereignty and raising their voice democratically in diasporas? Do you think like they have some space in all this new world scenario?
I think you do, because my argument has always been there is no conflict between human rights and national security. We're basically on the same page. For example, CSIS works a lot against transnational repression, whether it's Iran, India, China, Russia, and it is designed to protect Canadians. It's to make our communities feel safe. You can't say to people, immigrate to Canada, come and live here, raise families, but we've got these other geopolitical issues to deal with. So, just put up with what's going on. And so to me, human rights and strong national security converge. They're right there. And I get it that sometimes we have to make some compromises, but the messaging needs to be to Canadians that the government has your back. That when we say we want our communities to be safe, we mean it. It's not just a platitude at a conference, that we actually follow it up and show it. And one of the best ways of following it up ultimately is going to be with law enforcement action and hold people to account. Even a foreign state should be accountable to what it does in our country.
Okay. So then the next question is like, as you say, maybe some things are happening like behind the curtains for after all this invitation thing to the Prime Minister Modi. So do you think like as the Canada's stated priorities for the G7 agendas include countering foreign interference, strengthening peace and security, and combating transnational crime. So these are the priorities for the Canada in the G7. Given those goals and the serious allegations involving Indian agents in acts of violence and interference on Canadian soil, do you believe Prime Minister Modi will be challenged on these issues at the summit? Or is there a risk that these principles are selectively applied depending on a country's geopolitical weight?
Yeah, I, I, I don't think so at all, because a lot of these are basically platitudes. So, for example, transnational crime. Transnational crime, in my opinion, is not national security. But the Canadian government is saying that they're talking about cartels and fentanyl going across the border to placate Donald Trump. So I think that's why a lot of these messages, in many ways, are out there basically for Washington's ears, because we have our own trade issues. And so a lot of them are motherhood statements. It doesn't mean that our national security resources are going to be going after cartels and drug dealers just to placate Donald Trump. But we need to actually say that, write it with a new pen, sing kumbaya, and feel good about it. So I don't take all those statements as meaning an awful lot. I think it's a venue for these countries to get together, maybe build some relationships on a personal level between the leaders and then their respective deputies and things like that. But I don't think we're going to get any great wisdom coming from this. But at the end of the day, hopefully Canada will be in a stronger position But most importantly, messaging to Canadians that we do take seriously the safety and security of our communities.
Okay, so like in the end, the last question I want to know then, because uh, it's about the Khalistan, about India, about Canada, US,
Yeah,
so all these things. So India attacks Sikh activists in US, attacks Sikh activists in Canada, and we see last month fight between India and Pakistan, and the whole Pandora box open after that for the geopolitics. So
right.
the analytics think that US trying to put weight on India in the South Asia for their strategic interests against China. So, but
Yeah.
they also think that India failed, like in the Galwan with the China. India failed with the fight with the fighter jet down by the Pakistan in 2019, and again with this time like Rafael go down by the Pakistan and like six planes. So. Do you think that for the strategic interests, the US will start putting weight on another groups in that area, as like Sikhs are portraying themselves as a, probable buffer state for the Western interests in South Asia? So, do you think there is some like possibility in the coming future for this type of things?
I don't think so. I think a lot of this, we could call it outreach, is in many ways for public consumption. I know that's what the United States wants to do. They want to engage India as a check on China and that. I don't think they trust India any more than other states, and I don't think there's a lot of states that are trusting the Americans now with how they handle treaties and deals like that. I think most foreign states look out for their own interests. We have this dynamic with Russia and China. We have Iran in there. I think India is buying a lot of Russian oil. So I don't think anyone has any illusion that we're going to have some new alliance. India always had what was called a non-aligned group years ago with the Soviet Union and a few others. And this idea that we're going to be allies, I think, is a little naive. India will look out for its interests, as most emerging superpowers will do. And I wouldn't bet too much money on this one. But it sounds good at conferences anyway that we're building new relationships and all that. Maybe I'm too cynical,
Okay.
but wait and see.
Yeah, new relationships always like good.
Oh yeah.
So it's good to build a new. Yeah. So in the end, anything I miss, like in the form of questions, do you think you want to convey to the people?
No, it's very comprehensive. I know the Sikh community has been under a lot of. I can't imagine how much anxiety and fear in the last few years with what's been transpired. So, you certainly have my heart goes out to you on this, and it's obviously a rough time. When you find out foreign state has been doing this in our country, it's still unacceptable. And I think it needs to be a priority of the government. We talk a lot about what China does and Iran. So let's keep the attention on India as well. We can still rebuild, but let's not forget.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And as Canada prepares to sit alongside global powers at the G7 and reassert its commitment to peace, security, and human rights, it faces an uncomfortable question. Can we truly lead on these values if we hesitate to defend them at home? It's a big question. So, Dan, thank you for your insights and for helping us understand the depth of this movement. The conversation continues not just in diplomacy in studio, but in the streets and communities watching closely. So thank you again for giving us time and joining us here. And I say thank you to all the viewers who are watching us on TV84. So in the next show, I'll come with some other person on deep insights about the geopolitics, about the politics, and the issues affects the common people. So thank you so much. Have a good day.